Welcome, fellow castigators. This week I had the honor of viewing the new Doctor Who Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, which rather excitingly introduces the new Doctor and new companion. The special begins with narration from Ncuti Gatwa, saying, "Once upon a time," because I guess Russell T Davies forgot that he already did that 2 episodes ago. We see a hooded woman abandoning a baby at the doorstep of a church. The Doctor appears across the street and looks sad before the theme song plays. Next, we see Ruby Sunday, which sounds like a stripper, being interviewed by Davina McCall about being orphaned as a baby. There's a comical edge to the cold open being explained immediately. I have never seen the opening of a Doctor Who episode resolved so quickly. Anyway, McCall tells Ruby that through DNA testing, they can determine who Ruby's parents are. I don't know if in Britain they have a huge storage facility full of everyone's DNA that can be accessed without the donor's permission, but here in America such a thing is preposterous. Imagine the sheer amount of time and resources it would take to compare everyone who has ever set foot in that area of England's blood with Ruby's. Wouldn't it make more sense to try and get birth records for that date from nearby hospitals and then start to narrow them down? Regardless, Ruby is being really annoying in this scene, but I won't complain as it may be intentional. The sound guy is hearing strange voices through the mic, and tiny green hands appear to move a woman's coffee and eventually trip her. Then begins a montage where strange things happen to Ruby as the Doctor looks on. It's never explained whether the Doctor is following the green miscreants, or whether he's creepily following Ruby. A superbly bad singer is crooning Christmas tunes as Ruby plays the piano, which a pair of tiny hands unplugs. Next, the Doctor is twirling in a nightclub wearing a wife-beater and a kilt. You can hear Russell salivating over Gatwa's hard nips, and Ruby seems enamored with him too. Many will excuse this because Ncuti Gatwa grew up in Scotland. But we know that Russell would have no problem putting him in a regular skirt. It's been interesting watching the Doctor go from distinguished Victorian gentleman to a femmy club crawler with a tiny pedophile mustache. Russell's fetishization of Doctor Who is beginning to remind me of the head writer of Riverdale. Anyway, as Ruby watches the Doctor, she accidentally knocks her drink off the table. Despite being a significant distance away, the Doctor manages to catch it. Boy, he must be desperate to Cosby this woman. We're treated to another time jump where Ruby and her diversity squad are piling into a taxi. They pass under a giant snowman attached to a building, which is being dismantled by more tiny green hands. The Doctor sonics the traffic light so that the taxi will keep moving, but a woman pushing a pram comes around the corner. The Doctor tries to save the woman, and the big snowman head comes crashing down on him. The head is made of a light fabric, and he doesn't die, but a policeman comes by and says that he'll need to report the incident. The Doctor distracts the officer by saying that the woman he's planning on proposing to will say yes. Apparently, the sonic screwdriver has detected the diamond ring in his pocket and alerted the Doctor by making a ping sound. We're not told why the sonic was scanning for diamonds, or if the Doctor is just making a wild guess, because the Doctor enters the TARDIS and leaves. The policeman is inexplicably not surprised to see the TARDIS dematerialize. The TARDIS reappears on Ruby's street, where an old woman named Mrs. Flood is accusing her neighbor of leaving a police box on the sidewalk. She says that she hasn't seen one in 50 years. So I guess she doesn't go out much. See, even though police boxes began to be removed in the early 70s, many have been left intact to preserve architectural history. So unless Russell thinks the 80s was 50 years ago, or Mrs. Flood has been a hermit since the late 60s, the line doesn't really make sense. Anyway, resident hermit Mrs. Flood wishes Ruby a happy birthday as she enters her flat. Once inside, Ruby's adoptive mother learns that they will be fostering a baby named Lulubelle. The characters berate the baby for having a terrible name, and Ruby is left to take care of Lulubelle. Ruby gets a call from the interviewer, Davina McCall, who informs her that she was unsurprisingly unable to track down Ruby's biological parents. The McCall call gets cut short when a tree falls on an already injured McCall. Ruby can hear strange voices coming through the baby monitor and goes to investigate. The baby is missing, so Ruby climbs up through the open skylight. I'm curious to know what Ruby was thinking here. I mean, did she think the baby crawled through the ceiling? Ruby clambers onto the roof to find that goblins are taking the baby up a ladder. She doesn't seem surprised to see goblins and becomes angry when they hiss at her. Despite this toughness, she suddenly becomes afraid of standing on the roof. The ladder begins to move, so Ruby jumps on. The doctor is seen running across the rooftops, and he also jumps on the ladder. He hands Ruby a glove and says that he's invented something called intelligent gloves. He explains that the gloves create a kinetic transfer of mass, which allows him to hang off of things with minimal effort. Russell T. Davies can't help but ruin a potentially good moment and makes sure that Mavity gets name-dropped in there. The doctor then proceeds to explain to Ruby that goblins are called goblins because they gobble things. As the ladder ascends, we see that it's attached to a flying pirate ship that was obscured by clouds. This reminds me of the first Doctor short story, A Big Hand for the Doctor, where a flying pirate ship is abducting children, which in turn inspires J.M. Barrie to write Peter Pan. But that's besides the point. The ladder gets pulled into the ship where a horde of goblins are waiting for them. The goblins tie up the Doctor and Ruby, then leave them unguarded. The two discuss the goblins, and the Doctor says that the goblins chase instances of luck and coincidence because coincidence makes the baby tastier, however that works. He muses that perhaps coincidences are all accidents, which is why the goblins have been tormenting people. Except, if the goblins are deliberately causing accidents, then they're not accidents at all. Why? Why are you this stupid, Russell? The Doctor tells Ruby that the goblins are time riders, not time travelers. He gets offended by the suggestion, but doesn't explain the difference. He then easily extricates himself from his bindings and explains that he once had a long, hot summer with Harry Houdini. The third Doctor accredits his escape in Planet of the Spiders to lessons from Houdini, so either Russell T. Davies is retconning the Doctor's past sexuality, or he's completely unaware of the show's lore, and this incarnation of the Doctor banged Houdini sometime between bi-generating and stalking Ruby. Either way, it doesn't make sense considering how straight Houdini was. The Doctor unties Ruby and climbs through the vents of the ship. They hear music and can see Lulubelle on a conveyor belt below them. The goblins begin to sing, and sadly the lead singer has a supernormal non-goblin voice. She sings that they will feast on the baby for 3 days at least. I'm not sure how that would be physically possible considering the mass of a baby, but I think it's only in there because Russell is a superbly poor lyricist. For instance, the bridge goes, "Baby we need, baby we feed, eat with our teeth, better than beef." It's all very brilliant. The curtains at the end of the conveyor belt part to reveal a fat goblin puppet ready to eat Lulubelle. The lyrics get a little too self-aware as they sing, "He's the Goblin King, he's not a myth, he's an actual thing." I'm not sure how the goblins are going to feast on this baby if the Goblin King could obviously eat her whole. There's even a lyric about how many things he can eat at once. The Doctor and Ruby fall through the ceiling and land on the conveyor belt, which conveniently halts. The Doctor tries to stall by introducing himself and Ruby. He somehow knows the lead goblin singer's name, Janice, and tells her to hit it. For some reason, she complies, and unfortunately, the Doctor and Ruby begin to sing. Awkwardly, the Doctor immediately introduces Ruby again, and then Ruby rhymes king with thing, because they didn't just do that. There's something incredibly unsettling about watching the characters gyrate on the conveyor belt and talk sing with no sense of energy. I mean, could you imagine just how cringy it would be if I just suddenly and inorganically started singing? The Church on Ruby Road, the first episode. It's really quite gay, I'm telling you so. RTD is coming for your kids. He's got an agenda to feminize males. He's ignoring the past of your favorite tales. RTD does not like Doctor Who. He knows that Ncuti's a good actor, who is so much more than just gay. He knows he should do him justice, but he'll do what he wants anyway. The Doctor married River Song, has a granddaughter, but old Russell thought he should be made hotter. RTD treats legacies flippantly. Oh, Russell is obsessed with gayness. He only values sexuality. He's useless as a person, so he made it his whole personality. So you better not watch, turn off the TV. You'd better not pay that licensing fee, 'cause Doctor Who died a long time ago. Yeah, Doctor Who died a long time ago. The Doctor grabs a rope and Ruby and reverses the intelligent gloves, which makes them heavy, and they descend on the rope. I don't know where the mass is transferring from to make them heavy, but considering Russell T Davies actually introduced a science fiction element and explained it halfway decently, I'm just going to let it go. They arrive back in Ruby's flat, where the Doctor meets Ruby's grandmother, Cherry Sunday. I guess everyone in this family uses their stripper name. He seemingly flirts with Cherry before telling Ruby that the intelligent gloves are only at 3% power. Ruby finally starts reacting to the madness happening around her, but it turns out she's just stressed about the McCall call from earlier. The Doctor says he's adopted too, which I could accept since his parentage is left ambiguous in the 12th Doctor episode Listen, but then he adds that he only found out recently. I can only guess that Russell is reinforcing the timeless child again, which would be crazy since this is the 3rd episode in a row that it's mentioned. Anyhow, some flashy stuff happens in the sky, and Ruby disappears. No one remembers who Ruby is, and the pictures of the children that Ruby's mother has fostered have also vanished. The Doctor is crestfallen, and he shares a teary scene with Ruby's mother. It's all surprisingly pro-life for someone like Russell who doesn't procreate. The Doctor realizes that the goblins must have gone back in time and taken Ruby as a baby, so he returns to the church to find them doing exactly that. I have to say, he's pretty lucky to have guessed the goblins would choose that precise moment. He hops onto the ladder and reverses the intelligent gloves once again to drag the ship down and impale it and the Goblin King on the church's steeple. Ruby falls from the ship, and despite the significant height, she lands softly in the Doctor's arms. He leaves Ruby on the doorstep and resists the urge to talk to her mother, who is still walking away. She apparently didn't see or hear anything that transpired. We're not told what happens with the remains of the goblin ship atop the church, and it's never explained how the ship was never discovered by a plane or a satellite. But it doesn't matter to the doctor, who is rushing back to see if adult Ruby has returned. He uses the sonic screwdriver to break into the house, and the doctor quickly explains to Ruby how he went back to save her. She doesn't question any of it, and doesn't really seem to comprehend it either. The doctor runs off again to save Davina McCall from being crushed by the Christmas tree, and says, "Merry Christmas, Davina McCall," despite not knowing about this incident in the first place. For my American viewers, Davina McCall is a real-life person who hosts game shows. So you can imagine how strange this must have been for the British audience. Imagine if the Avengers went back in time and saved Drew Carey, and they were like, "Wow, it's Drew Carey. I love you, Drew Carey. Merry Christmas, Drew Carey." Finally, the mentally deficient Ruby pieces together what the doctor was saying about time travel and inspects the TARDIS outside. Mrs. Flood inexplicably wishes Ruby good luck before she enters. In a stunningly clever last line, the doctor proclaims, "I'm the doctor," which swiftly cuts away. Unfortunately, Russell isn't done, and in the bizarre final scene, Mrs. Flood looks directly into the camera and says, "What? Never seen a TARDIS before?" and then winks. The end. For those of you who don't know, this is the grand introduction to what Russell T Davies is calling Series 1. His motivation for bi-generating the Doctor was to soft reboot the show, with Ncuti Gatwa as the 1st/15th Doctor. This was an all-important moment, and honestly, RTD delivered a nothing sandwich. It's amazing how much time Russell can fill with absolutely nothing. The goblins try to steal a baby, they fail, they try to steal another baby, and are quickly and easily vanquished. At least the Doctor actually got to be involved and save the day this time, I guess. Russell seems to be determined to write the simplest episodes possible with little to no character development. There aren't any distinctive qualities to Ruby's personality, or lack thereof, and she barely reacts to any of the crazy stuff she witnesses. Stephen Moffat had a good rule of thumb when writing companions by trying to think of what type of person would be insane enough to leave their life behind to travel with the Doctor. On the other hand, this new Doctor isn't terribly distinct either. He doesn't seem to have any unique traits or qualities, and most of the time Russell just resorts to gay stereotypes, which is a shame because Ncuti Gatwa does possess charm and screen presence. I feel like if Russell is just going to take advantage of his sexuality and relegate him to a stereotype, then Gatwa will never be able to reach his potential as the Doctor. This level of character development gives me flashbacks to the Chibnall era. One thing I can say for this special, though, is that it's directed much more competently than the previous 3 specials. The colors look nice, the sets look nice, and they don't barrage the audience with ugly CG every 30 seconds. Even the score was a tad better. I actually found Gatwa's theme stuck in my head a few times throughout the day. That being said, I'm not really a fan of the Doctor's new fit. Most Doctors have at least some part of their outfit custom made, but Gatwa is wearing stuff right off the shelf, including a truly awful zip-up jumper from Madcap England. He's also wearing the previous incarnation's trousers, so I guess the Doctor isn't against hand-me-downs. Accompanying him is the flattest sonic screwdriver ever conceived, which seems to also be a Star Trek phaser-themed butt plug. It doesn't even vaguely resemble a cylindrical screwdriver. I mean, it's supposed to be a scientific instrument, not a water pistol. I will say, however, props to the Folly department, who had a pretty satisfying click when he turns it on and off. Overall, old fans will be underwhelmed by the church on Ruby Road, and potential newcomers will be utterly confused. Russell doesn't go out of his way to explain anything, like the Doctor being an alien, the TARDIS, or the slightly psychic paper. There's literally a line where Ruby asks what the sonic screwdriver is, and the Doctor answers, "A sonic screwdriver," with no further explanation, and Ruby just accepts it. This is not shaping up to be the big new thing that Disney was hoping it would be. I bet they feel pretty foolish now for funding 2 whole series in advance. Now, Doctor Who won't return until May, but if you don't fancy suffering through it yourself, you can subscribe, and I'll watch it for you and report back with a summary of all the Russell T nonsense. In the meantime, I will be covering a variety of pop culture topics, with an eventual roundup review of all 4 Doctor Who specials at once. Stay censorious.
Well, this is gay.